Hey guys, welcome to our first but not last activity day in this program. Today we're talking about warm-ups, and this is going to be day 1 of 2 warm-up specific videos. And we're coming off of that warm-up lecture with PowerPoints. And today our warm-up is kind of geared towards maybe like a total body lift. There's a little emphasis on the lower body and the core, but we're going to have some upper body in here as well. Just briefly, and we'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. And the best way to get something out of this today would be to check out what I'm doing, and then pause it, and then repeat that, and basically join in. So warm up along with me, as is convenient for you. So we want these to be active. You could also watch this whole thing and then go out and do it, but then you're kind of like going back in and starting and stopping a little bit. But I would advise watching a little bit and then doing a little bit, right? So keep in mind that we're going to start very general and we'll get more specific as the session goes on. And we would start with maybe like a raise activity, so that might be jogging for 5 minutes, or a series of jumping jacks or burpees or jump rope, or if you guys are still on lockdown or something, you can go turn on some music and dance around. Whatever it is, you want to be moving around for a handful of minutes to get that heart rate up. That's going to raise your body temperature. Remember, warmer tissues are less likely to incur injuries, and a warmer nervous system will also send messages slightly faster. So all things that are good for us preventing injuries and improving performance. So pause it now, do your 5 minutes of activity, and come back to me. And moving on, let's go to our mobilization block. So in this mobility block, where would we even start? So think back to Mike Boyle's joint by joint theory, and how we alternate the joints. We go ankle is mobility, knee is stability, hip is mobility, lumbar spine is stability, thoracic spine is mobility, and it goes all the way basically from your toes to your fingertips up to the base of your skull. So for us today, based on a kind of a lower body dominant lift and maybe followed by some running afterwards, and what we could do today is maybe start focusing on those ankles first. So ankles, cheap and easy one to do any place, anytime, would be the ankle 3-way. So just coming down to a half kneeling position, and as we're just kind of leaning forward here, we're just going to put a little bit of weight on top of that knee, and you even get a little bit of a hip flexor action on the back side here. And our goal is to just work the back of this calf and ankle right here, getting pressure into it, pushing on it, not too much. Again, we're not doing static stretches, so we're going to keep everything under 15 seconds on any kind of hold that we would do, and we would rock out of it. And honestly, when I get in there like that and I'm elongating and stretching out the back side of my calf and my Achilles along, when I'm coming out of that hole, I like to push in through the toes and actually activate that calf a little bit. So that way I'm not just doing flexibility training, but I'm actually doing some mobility training, because remember, we want to mobilize things by working through it, right? So that doesn't mean we'll do that all the time, but when we have opportunities to activate muscles within our mobility work, even better. All right, so we took that knee to the outside, we held for less than 15 seconds, we rocked back, kind of pushing off that toe a little bit, and then we might come back in center, and we're holding a couple of deep breaths, under 15 seconds, dig your toes in, rock back, and on that last one we're going to come in, and that one's a bit tricky for me. Toes in, there we go, and switch. Nice. Knee forward. Driving my heel a little bit better, so I'm going to reposition. And I'm going to focus on getting my knee to the outside on my first one. Nice. And rock it back 15 seconds. And we'll go straight in. You can lean on it. You can also put some plate. You just put a plate on top of your knee if you care to. And rock out of it. And then bring it back in and across. Nice. We could also throw in some, like a downward dog with just some alternating knee bends to just add in a little bit more volume of stretching, pre-stretching. Doesn't mean we have to do both of these ankle mobilities, both of these ankle mobility activities, but we can, and just since we're kind of zipping through them today, we will. So just to get some pressure back there, under 15 seconds on one side, and then I'm going to switch knees and help open up that calf and ankle on the other side. And we would just go back and forth a handful of times. Pretty easy stuff. We don't typically, so all of that has to do with dorsiflexion, with bringing that toe up towards our shin. Not many people are struggling with plantar flexion. That's not the biggest issue for most athletes. A few sports that it is would maybe be like a ballet. I've never trained ballet dancers, but I understand that they go up and pivot on their toes. I've worked with dive, and with our divers, that's one of the issues, is that they're not fully plantar flexing their toes, and so that apparently that creates lines and it decreases their score. So it's something that they might end up worrying about. So if you do want to do some mobilization in the basically the extension of that joint, one thing I like is I'll probably do this with my shoes off, but I call this the 70-30 stretch, and I'll put about 70% of my weight on that high knee, and I'm gonna stretch the flexion of that ankle, and then I've got about 30% of my weight on this off ankle, and that's stretching the extension of that ankle. And so over here, it's pulling on the front of my shin, on the top of my foot a little bit, so that where your tongue of your shoe goes. So not the biggest issue that I see in athletes, not super common in my background, but if you wanted to do a static stretch to help work on that flexibility, this would be a good way to go. And since we hit that one for a little bit, we'll just bring it to the other side and kind of even up here. Oof. Yeah, that's it, and it's just an easy one to do while you're watching TV or on the phone with somebody or anything like that. Pretty laid back one right here. Nice. Next, we're going to move up to our hips. So remember, we mobilized our ankle. That knee is more about stability than it is mobility, and now we're at the hip. So hip, we'll do a couple of big sort of bang for buck ones here. On the hips, just start off by sitting at a 90-90 angle. So my hips coming out at 90 degrees, my knees going out from there at 90 degrees, and my ankles at 90 degrees. Pretty much the same thing over here. And a lot of people, just getting into that position is going to cause them some trouble. And if you can sit upright and try to have a vertical spine in that position, you're probably going to feel some muscles starting to fire and get tight in there. And that's okay. That just means that we have some mobility to work on. And this is kind of tough for me, so it's a good reminder that I need to be doing this as well. And I'm just going to set up this way, just so you guys can see my next progression. So progression 1 would just be sitting in here, and maybe somebody can barely get in that position, or they get in that position and they can sit here, but they've got to have kind of like that tripod arm off to the side. That's all right, there's nothing wrong with that. And we're taking deep breaths while we're in here. And then if you're able to maintain that position by yourself, even better. And then if that's not so hard, or you want a bigger challenge, what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of pretend like our shoes are magnetized to the floor. Oh man, you can see I'm getting through it, but I'm not crushing it. And so you stay upright, and you're going to attempt with no hands to flip those hips. And we're doing our best to keep 90-degree angles. I have to reposition here and there. And we'll come through one more time. Oh yeah. So we've hit our 90-90 angles on that. And what are we going to hit next? Our next progression after that would be we're going to get a little bit of additional mobility through this, but we're also getting some activation. So we're going to drive our hips up and through. And the top here, I'm squeezing my glutes, and then I relax them down. And then I'm going to keep my shoes magnetized to the ground. I'm going to flip my hips over. I'm going to bridge up again. At the top, I tighten up my glutes. And at the top, I feel my hip flexors opening up on the front side. Because this is just kind of it's kind of a bad mamma jamma. And it just gets a little bit of everything about the hips. An awkward position. We're doing sort of a 360-degree mobilization there. And we're getting some activation in there. So that's a good challenge. And again, just getting in a position and trying to sit up tall would be progression 1. Progression 2 would be flipping the hips with your shoes magnetized to the floor. And progression 3 would be including that bridge in there, and then keeping everything else going. All right, so we have mobilized our ankle, our hip, and then where do we go to next? Well, our lumbar spine would kind of be the next joint series, but that's a stabilization area. So we go up to the thoracic spine. And that thoracic spine, remember, we have breakfast at 7 vertebrae in the cervical spine. We have lunch at 12 vertebrae in the thoracic spine. And we have dinner at 5 vertebrae in the lumbar spine. So that thoracic spine with the 12 vertebrae, that's where we want so much of our athletic movement and our contortion to come from. So whether it's baseball or volleyball or tennis or whatever, when we're rotating a lot, we want that to naturally and freely come from our thoracic spine. And when it doesn't, it's going to come from somewhere else. So we want to just keep that in mind, and we're gonna rehearse the pattern of movement through our thoracic spine, so that when we need it, when we need to call on it, it's going to naturally occur. So for that thoracic spine, if you've got a pillow or a foam roll, works great. We're going to lay on the side. Make sure I'm in the camera angle there. So laying on your side, and that top knee is going to come forward, and my bottom hand. So I'm laying on my right side. My left knee comes forward. My right hand latches in behind that left knee. My left hand is going to reach back and grab the tongue of my right shoe, and that locks in. And I'm going to try to relax my neck. I'm laying on my side. I'm square towards you guys. I'm taking some regular breaths, nothing too major. A couple of regular breaths. I'm not sure if you guys can hear my exhales there. And then after a few regular breaths, I'm going to take a big breath in. All that air is going to go down in my belly. I'm going to hold that big breath down in my belly, and I'm going to initiate a movement, trying to drive my top shoulder to the ground back behind me while I slowly exhale. And remember to keep that front knee on the ground out in front of you. And when I run out of air, I'm going to reset to square. I'm going to take as many regular breaths as I need, maybe 0, maybe a handful. And then I'm going to take another big breath, and I'm going to go again. Twisting, trying to drive that top shoulder down to the ground, back behind me, while my front knee, my right hand is driving my left knee into the ground. And I run out of air. And even though that was my second one, I got a few degrees further on that one. I can feel I'm starting to loosen up already just within those two. And I'm going to do a third one. I'm taking some regular breaths. Down in my belly, pushing that air down in my gut. I won't go on too big of a tangent today on why that belly breathing is important, but it's extremely important and we want to stick with it as much as possible. And then my last big breath, and I'm going to pivot, slowly exhaling and rotating. Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm getting further. And so I'm going to stay in this position for just another minute here. And the reason this stretch can be, one of the reasons this stretch is so powerful is that it locks in different parts of your body. If movement is going to come, it's going to come from your thoracic spine. And probably the most common thing, the two most common things I do when walking around a room full of athletes to adjust them is I remind them to keep their front knee down on the ground, and I take that bottom knee and I say, hey, can we go back just a little bit further? So if you find that you are casually, easily like pinning your shoulder to the ground back behind you, I would say you're either doing one or both of those things. You've either got the front knee floating in the air or the bottom knee crouched up here where it's not causing any stretching. So let's keep the front knee down and the bottom knee is going to rotate back. All right, let's hit some reps on the other side. So I'm laying on my left side now. That right leg is going to come out forward. That bottom leg is going to come back behind me. So right knee down on the ground out in front of me with my left hand latched in behind that knee. And my left knee is kicked back behind me with my right hand grabbing my left ankle. I'm taking some regular breaths. We'll do 3 reps on this side as well. Regular breaths down my belly. Big breath down my belly. Slow exhale. My neck is relaxed with my head on the pillow. And yeah, nice. I run out of air and I come back. And I noticed at that time, I went pretty far. So my first instinct is to take my bottom leg, my left knee, and I'm just going to pull that a little bit tighter and challenge that a little bit more. And I'm belly breathing regular. A couple of those. And a big belly breath in. And I'm going to slowly exhale back. I'm just rotating and moving. Yeah, that feels good. And I'm going to relax. And I'm going to hit one more. Nice. Good. Those are your bretzels. So that's all that torsion. Let's hit a couple of movements with flexion and extension. So that would just be something simple like a cat and camel, where I'm going to purposefully kind of breathe with my flexion and my extension. When my belly is low, I inhale. I inflate my belly. And when my belly is low, I'm trying to drive my shoulder blades back to my belt line, back to my glutes basically. And then I'm going to drive my spine up to the ceiling. I'm exhaling, and I'm trying to drive my ribs to my hip bones, to my pelvis. And that one's just kind of easy and good. Nice. And we'll relax on that one. That one's pretty easy to teach. You're not going through such big ranges of motion that even if somebody has some unhappy stuff going on their back, whether it's a strained muscle or a herniation in the disc, that one doesn't really get the back hurting too much. So that can be a good one to start with. And then let's move on to the world's greatest stretch. So here's one that's going to be a little bit more of that rotation like we were talking about earlier, like we were working with the bretzel. And I take my right foot outside my right hand, and my right hand is going to be hitting some rotation here, reaching for the ceiling. And we can reach for the elbow to the ground. Some people will actually do it, but that's not the intention. We want to keep a neutral spine during this. Not really not really the most beneficial thing to do a lot of work with a spine that is out of alignment, because that's not going to translate when you're in a dynamic scenario and you're attempting to maintain a neutral spine while performing athletic movements. And if you're feeling crazy, you can even hit the opposite arm too. And as you'll see, I'm pretty limited over there. I could use some more work in this department. Nice, and we'll switch feet. Now I've got my left foot outside my left hand, and we're going to attempt to drive that elbow to the ground. And I'm taking my hand up to the sky. When I go hand to the sky, my eyes are going to follow my fingers. And hopefully that helps me keep a neutral spine. And I did a couple reps over there. Let's try it the hard way with the opposite arm. Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. And I mean, I'll tell you, we're getting hip flexors in here. We're getting a little bit of core stability, and we're getting that thoracic mobility. So it's called the world's greatest stretch, and if it's not the world's greatest stretch, it's probably pretty close. I'm a big fan of that one. And the slower you go, the harder it is. So don't be in such a rush to just knock it out. All right, so that would be maybe our mobilization phase. We took 3 of our biggest joints. That's where 3 of our biggest injury sites would be: the ankle, the hip, the lower back, especially that lower back. We talk about that all the time, how the number 2 reason people go to the doctor in the US is low back pain. If we can prevent low back pain, or maybe even help it rehab or heal, then we can probably make a living doing that. So keep that in mind. So we did our raise, right? We all took our 5-minute jog, or we did jumping jacks, or we jogged in place, or burpees, or whatever. And now we're done mobilizing for today. Where do we move to next? Let's move on to activation. So ramp or map, remember map, we already raised, so now we're in that map phase. We're going to mobilize, activate, and potentiate. So as we're activating, what do we want to activate? On a lower body day, lower body dominant, probably the best thing we can always do is hit our core. We want to activate that core, right? And I'm going to steal a few movements from Stuart McGill. He is a doctor at, he's a PhD at Waterbury University up in Canada. And he is kind of like the back guy. And it's his passion and his specialty to talk about low back pain and how we can prevent it and heal it. So this is the McGill 3. And I'm borrowing it from Dr. Stuart McGill. And I'll say that since I've learned these 3 and I've used them on a regular basis, my own back tweaks or back strains have been reduced dramatically, and the same thing with my athletes. The more I use these 3 activities, the more results I see as far as decreased low back pain. So I'm a big fan of them, and I do them regularly, semi-regularly at least. We'll start off with the bird dog. So we're going to go to all fours position. And we're going to go opposite arm, opposite leg, elevate. And the goal here is to maintain a neutral spine even while you're doing that movement. And you can do these bird dogs several different ways. I've just got an isometric hold at the top here going. And I'm trying to belly breathe. I'm trying to exaggerate my breath a little bit. So holding this position, I'm wobbling a little bit. I feel the back of my shoulder talking to me. I feel my glute talking to me. I'm super emphasizing my belly breathing, so my gut is actually talking to me a little bit too here. And we just held that for about 15 seconds. We'll do just a couple more seconds. And good, relax. So that's just one rep on one side. About 15 seconds between me talking and breathing. Heck, I don't know, it might have been 7 seconds or 30 seconds. So don't judge me on that. So you could do a single rep in an isometric hold just like that for 20 seconds, or you could do it for 10 big breaths. I've been doing that a lot lately. I'm really liking it. It's very auto-regulatory, and it helps me get more out of it. So I'm a big fan of just holding the rep for breaths instead of time, and that helps us emphasize the breathing pattern as well, because that breathing musculature, that breath musculature, all those muscles down there. Well, long story short, I know I'm going to get into it later on, but basically when we're born, and I've got a couple of kids, I've got a 2-year-old girl and a 6-month boy, and they both, when they inhale, they get big old pot bellies, and when they exhale, they get little 6-packs kind of, because they breathe properly. And we all did that too when we were little. But as we age, and as we have cell phones, and we drive, and we get stressed and all this other stuff, our breathing pattern moves from down here around our core to up here around our neck. And that's bad. So if we can combine reprogramming the muscles we were born to breathe with to do their job, if we can combine that with some of these posture exercises, we get even more out of it. So let's do an isometric hold on that other side, and let's just count 10 breaths. It's going to be left arm, right leg, and up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Good. Yeah, I actually started to feel that pretty good around that like 6th or 7th breath there, so that works really well for me. And you know, the most typical way that I've done them in the past, but I'll be honest, I'm gravitating towards the isometric hold more and more lately, is I've done the bird dogs, and I've done them for reps. You know, that might be 5 per side, might be 20 per side. I would not advise a true alternating rep each time. That gives you a little bit too much of a break in between, and it's also kind of annoying because people note that their knees kind of get chafed or whatever. So just a chunk of advice, but find a way to work that into your program. And then McGill also has the side plank. That'd be his. So we just did the bird dog. This is movement 2, is the side plank. And what's going to be a little untraditional is going to be that my feet will not be stacked. Gosh, you guys, I'm trying to get my shoes on the camera here. All right, my feet will not be stacked like this, but my top foot is actually going to be out front. And my top hand, instead of being on hip or in the sky, my top jazz hand is going to be on my bottom shoulder. And what that's going to do is that between the foot coming forward and the hand being across in that way, it actually rotates me just a little bit extra, and I'm going to get some extra intercostal work and some extra oblique work, especially if I pair that with big belly breaths. So that's what we're going to do. And we don't want to be here all day. We've got plenty left to cover, but we're just going to hit one set. Let's go 10 big breaths on each side. And up. Big belly breath. Big exhale, tightening up our 6-packs. Tighten up everything on that spine, and that's 1. And that's 2.
and that's 3. And I'm also squeezing my glutes tight on this, so don't forget those puppies. And that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, nice. I was shaking just a little bit on that, I'm not gonna lie. But I think that's a good thing. I think Dr. McGill would be proud of me for shaking because I'm working hard on that. All right, here we go. We're locked in, glutes are tight, belly's tight, and we're belly breathing. 10 reps. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Nice, good. All right, that's our second out of 3 movements from Dr. McGill. Here comes the third. This is going to be an offset crunch, and the benefit of this is that we're reinforcing the natural S-curve of the spine. So what we're going to do here is our hands are actually going to be in the small of our back. And if you've got great shoulder mobility, you might really interlock those fingers all the way. My shoulder mobility is so-so, so I'm actually just going to have kind of like my fingertips together. I can physically do that, but when I'm actually performing the crunch, it's not super comfortable on my shoulders. So I'm going to kind of cheat just a little bit like that, and you do what you got to do. So I've got my hands underneath that lower spine. And again, you can do this several different ways. You can take a big breath in at the bottom, crunch up into it, and when I'm crunching, I'm trying to touch my ribs to my pelvis. So I'm trying to touch it, I'm just trying to squeeze my belly as small as possible. I'm not doing some kind of sit-up, and I would also say watch out for driving your elbows into the ground. So I'm crunched up, my elbows are up, I exhale that first breath, and I control it back down. And that's how you can continue on that way if you want. You can breathe in, crunch up into it, and have a long, slow exhale until you're almost like lightheaded a little bit, and then control it back a little bit. And I've been doing that, and I've liked it. But again, kind of like the same tangent I'm on with my bird dogs, is that I've also been enjoying just holding the position at the top, and I'm flexing my six-pack as best as I can. Sometimes my 2-year-old daughter likes to come in and just cannonball in my gut. So I'm kind of getting ready for her to do that. And while I'm squeezing those abs, I'm also performing my belly breaths. And it's not easy. You guys can hear the strain in my voice. You might see me shaking on camera just a little bit too. And you can do reps of 20 seconds or 10 breaths or whatever it is. And relax it back, and we'll switch sides, and we'll try to do about the same as much work as we did on the first side. So let's do two reps with a single breath. Ready? Breath in and up into it, tight belly, and just slowly exhale out. That's 1. Relax back. And again, big breath in, up into it, long breath out. Relax back. Whew. And here comes a big one. We're going to go up and we're going to take a handful of breaths while we're at the top. Ready? And up. Ready? Here's 5 breaths. Tight belly, ready for the daughter to come in and cannonball onto our belly. She's about 30 pounds, so it's starting to get pretty serious. And let's just do one more. Nice. If you're doing that right, your belly will get lit up. So we don't need to do again, Dr. Stuart McGill, not only does he
is he an advocate for all these stability movements, but he's also warning people against the dire effects of
constantly just crunching and doing sit-ups and movements that are
can become fairly problematic for the spine to just have that acute flexion repeatedly over and over again. And it doesn't have a whole lot of application to the sporting world. And as far as maybe trying to look good at the beach, I would challenge you all to consider stability core work to be your meat and potatoes, and some of the crunches and crunch variations to be more of like maybe your broccoli and your dessert. There's just a little bit less of those. So, or if you're like me and you eat a bunch of broccoli, then make your stability movements like your broccoli. So, but the bulk of your core exercises, I would encourage you to be more stability based, especially in the beginning of a lift when we are activating and we're not in the performance phase. We're just trying to get the body ready to go out and move optimally. All right. We'll pick up the pace here for a handful more little bullets. We're going to go to glutes. Okay, so the glute, again, I've got those kids. I guess we're talking about them a little bit today. And when they're born, well, my daughter was a scrawny little 6 pound, 7 ounce girly, but even in that little frame, she had kind of a booty on her. And the reason that is that our babies are born with booties on them because there's just a whole bunch of muscle back there and it just kind of sticks out. Okay, so those glutes help us extend the hip. They help us abduct the hip. And they also help us externally rotate at the hip. So there's a lot of action coming from there. Especially think about all that with just sprinting and how if you're using propulsion from your hips, you're going to be a better athlete. And I've noticed, especially with going out I spent a lot of my career working with football players, and a lot of them kind of pride themselves on having the muscles they need as well as the muscles that you might want. So they'll do lots of squats and core work and lots of biceps too. And when I got to spend a little bit of time at the Olympic Center, I saw athletes that were in fencing, in judo, in Olympic weightlifting, and they might look like your average like librarian from their fingertips down to their waist, and then it would get to their waist and it would just thicken up and look like kind of like a baby Hulk from their hips down. So I gotta say that if I could build one thing on athletes, the glutes is not a bad place to start. And then my daughter was born like that, but my son was born 9 pounds 10 ounces, so he was just thick everywhere. But he still had that big booty, and if you don't have kids yet, and if you ever do, you can expect that they'll probably have a little rump on them too. So just like we don't want to lose our breathing mechanics, babies come out of the womb breathing properly, and they've got the booty back here. We sort of want to reinstigate our breathing pattern just like that, and we want to grow that booty a little bit, or at least keep it active. So I don't want you guys to have to all go buy new jeans because your butt's got too big from muscles, but we actually want to keep those just active so that we can be better in the weight room and on the competition field. Or if you're just trying to get leaner, we know that we want increased muscle mass, right? So put some muscle back here and it will incinerate some extra calories for you. So it's a win-win-win situation. Glutes, just a couple of simple quick ones. We can bridge up right there. Okay, so that is our extension, right? But that glute bridge is often done poorly. On that glute bridge, how high do we want to go? Do we want to drive off the toes or the heels? Let's drive off the heels. How high do we want to go? As high as possible. I coached it that way for a lot of years, but I realized that I was telling people that, and what they were doing is they were squeezing their glutes for a little bit, and then, Coach Mitch wants me to go as high as I can, and they start arching that lower back, and they get that lower back firing, and that's not what we want. We just want to squeeze the glutes as tight as possible. So for me, that takes off like
a little bit of range of motion right there. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to squeeze those glutes as tight as possible. And so that's a simple one for hip extension. Let's talk about external rotation. Is we can come in here and we can externally rotate with some clamshells. A lot of times I'll tell people to lay down as if they're laying against a wall, from their knee to their throat, basically, in a straight line. And a little pause there. Or sometimes you bring that forward, and a little pause there is going to give you a little bit of a different feel. And you can also bring it forward all the way. That one disappears on me, so I tend to stay back here. It's what I feel. I know that the anatomy is working in a way that I desire right there. And that's going to hit that glute med, which helps me do so many things. And we did a dozen over there. And we'll do a dozen over here. And you got to remember, since we've already talked so much about glutes, we'll talk about them just a little bit more. You got to remember that when it comes to a muscle firing, it's all or nothing. It's the all or nothing principle, is that once a motor neuron tells a muscle fiber to fire, it's going to fire. But when we have big muscles or muscle complexes like the glutes, it takes longer to get a full contraction of all the musculature that we're trying to fire. Now our eyelid, with just one blink, it basically gets a full hard contraction. But our glute, it takes a little while, so you want to slow things down. You want to give the lifter, the athlete, an opportunity to really squeeze that glute just as tight as they can, and they're going to get more out of that. They're going to get more fatigue and more trauma to the muscle, which will cause more growth. So we got extension and external rotation, but what about abduction? Quite a few things there. If you've got a band, you can just throw that around the ankles, throw them into a little bit of athletic position here, and we're just going to abduct over and over again. You can pick your poison. A little balancing act there. And you'll notice that's the first piece of equipment I've touched today, right? Okay, maybe I put my head on a foam roll, but that could be a pillow. Or actually, I've kind of got a big head and a long neck, so I could have just put my head on the floor. I don't hate that, but a lot of people kind of do. For whatever reason, doesn't really bother me, and my breath cells are fine with it. But that's the first piece of equipment that I've touched today. So if you guys are locked down or not at a gym, there's nothing that you should not have done so far today. Let's see. So that's got our glutes firing activated. Activate them ahead of time, and then they're going to be easier to access when we start our performance phase. All right, so just a few more things. We're actually going to drift up to the shoulders now. Again, our shoulders are poorly designed. They're prone to injury. They're hard to strengthen. They're hard to rehab, and they're just kind of like finicky. They're a complicated joint. So I'm just going to throw 3 quick movements at you. One is going to be, this is not all 3, this is its own movement. One is going to be the band 3-way. So just performing a pull apart right there. So horizontal pull apart, caddy corner there, caddy corner here. And this is just an easy one that is just going to warm up a little bit of everything. And if you've ever tweaked your shoulder, one of the first go-tos is just to strengthen all the little muscles around that shoulder cap. So if we do that ahead of time, it's going to help take some of the stress off of our connective tissues, like our labrum, or some of the weaker muscles like our rotator cuffs. So if we can keep the big muscles firing, that's great, but we also want to keep the little guys in the game too. So there's a mix we can do for the shoulders, but we kind of want to stick with some smaller ones that really isolate the muscles. Doing heavy shoulder overhead presses, not necessarily going to prepare us to go out and throw pitches or hit volumes or get into really awkward positions on a wrestling mat or doing jiu-jitsu or whatever we do.
So, all right, we went over the shoulder three-way. That's just a cheap and easy one with a band. How about underhand position for no monies? Right there. So I do not want to turn it into a tricep extension. I want it to be hard. I want it to be challenging, but I just want a small rotation there. That's all we're working on. So with a band, that's a couple of cheap and easy ones. I already tied up a band over here earlier. And what I'm going to do here, we're going to back it up, is I'm going to get some shoulder blade movement in here. Long arms. I don't want to do a bicep curl or a row. You could, but that's not my goal. My goal is just to hit some scapular retraction reps. I'm letting the scaps out, and then I'm squeezing them back in. And why is this so important? Well, not only is it firing on muscles that we want to hit, but it's also integrating or innervating a movement pattern that we want to use. So those tight shoulder blades, in the weight room, we want tight shoulder blades when we're bench pressing, when we're deadlifting, when we're squatting, when we're cleaning, when we're getting a drink of water. We never really want to get exposed out in front under strain. Even when we're doing pull-ups and we let the shoulder blades sort of drift away to get some extra access to our lat, still under control. So anytime you can integrate some scapular traction there, that's great, especially in warm-ups. And if you don't have a band like that, or a band, if you don't have any of those bands, let's hit those movements with no bands. All right, so I had the band on my ankles, and I was doing like the side steps there, and I pivoted over and did some balance work. Well, what if I just come over to a wall here? I've got my foot against the side piece there. My body weight is over here, and I'm gonna attempt to abduct that leg right there. And when I do that, that glute is firing. So I'm getting something out of it, even though I have no equipment around me. I could do that against a wall. I could lay on my side and just do some leg lifts right there. If that's easy as all get out, maybe have a partner or a roommate come over and put the weight on top of your ankle. Not super complicated to still perform those movements. For the bands, we did not, let's see. I've got no band. You know what? Just go belly down and do some shoulder black burns. Right here, do a Y, a T, and a W. And we're still getting our posterior shoulder, and we've got no equipment. That's not too bad, right? And the band is good, but so are these. So don't worry about not having equipment. And we hit the scapular retraction. A lot of times I'll have a group of 30 or 40, and I just say, okay, hit the bent over scap rows, and we just bend it over, and we do the same thing I was doing with that band earlier. We hit scap rows, left, reel them in, squeeze them to the top. So we're now active. We reinforce activation on the core, we reinforce activation on the booty, on our glutes, and we reinforce on our upper back and our shoulders, right? So we're in a pretty good standing. We did some things that will help prevent injuries as well as boost performance. And we're gonna really quick, we're gonna hit 3 movements for our potentiation. Our potentiation block. All right, so we're trying to get the CNS system firing here. All right, we're not jumping for height here. Just gonna go hands on hips. That's a pogo. All that action is coming from below the knee. We're getting a lot of ankle work there. And what I'm really doing is I'm hitting my stretch reflex, and I'm getting my brain to send out nerve signals down to my lower half of my body on a quick, rapid pace. And that's gonna help get me excited and ready to lift heavy, run fast, or just be dynamic. So we'll do a set of 20 pogos. Yeah. Pogos, easy. How about a banded good morning? Let's see here. Push it down, step in. I'm gonna hinge up. I'm trying to do some extra glute work and just reinforce my hinge pattern. And I'm right there. And I'm gonna do around 12 or 15. I don't have my count right now. I'll just do a few more. All I know is my glutes and my hamstrings are starting to talk to me already. Quick activity right there. And what if you didn't have a band? And again, having a set of bands around the house is a great way to stay in shape even when COVID-19 hits and the world shuts down. Knocks the wind out of you a little bit. So banded good morning is great, but if you don't have a band, you can still hit that potentiation. You can still be quick with your good mornings. And my last one I'm gonna hit is a med ball slam. We'll do a few reps here. And I'm trying to get over it and put it into the ground. And that's gonna fire my anterior core. And I want a hinge pattern, but after I release it, I want to maintain stability. So don't judge me, well, judge me, but if any of those reps I did so far, if I release and then fold over like a Pinocchio doll or whatever, that's bad. So when I release, I want to maintain my posture. So we raised our body temp with 5 minutes of jogging. We mobilized the ankle, the hip, and the thoracic spine. We activated the core of the glutes, the shoulder, and we potentiated the whole body with pogos. We did our banded good mornings, and we did our med ball slams. You guys make sure that you're actually doing this. And you don't need equipment for any of it. That med ball slam, you can just do a vertical jump instead. On that vertical jump, just really stick your posture on the way down. But if you have equipment, do as I do. Awesome, guys. See you on warm-up day 2. See you next time.